to that. We got Joyce, Mary, Laura, Chris, Katie.
Hey, everybody. We're coming up a couple minutes on the hour, so we went ahead and had ourselves go live. And great to see some people already waiting for us in the chat. Hey, Laura, time for education. Professor Vinny is here with us, so we are going to see what the professor has to share with us today. Chris, welcome, Chris Reese. Name I don't think I recognize. So if maybe you've been on Vinny's sales before or have already followed Vinny, and welcome to the live sale. Joyce as well, Joyce Gerald. Looks like Joyce might have saying a little early. We might have gotten confused. Might have confused her on time zone. So I'm not sure if Laura, if she's still here. But reclaimed by Mary. Mary, great, you're here.
Mary, your sale was awesome yesterday. You did great.
Jeffrey's here.
Real nifty. Woo woo.
Jeffrey, Real Nifty Vintage. Thanks for joining us, Jeffrey. So we're going to go ahead and give a couple of minutes as people start logging in. I do not have my trusty helper today, my daughter Amelia. So I'll be trying to run everything on my end with... But Vinny's really going to be the one that holds the floor here. So we're going to try and let a couple more people come in. Then we'll do a little bit of introductions and let Vinny share his collection of Coca Cola advertising trays. And actually, that's a good question, Vinny. As I was trying to do some of the demos and some of the ads that we were doing, is what do you refer to them? Are they just advertising trays, tin trays? What's kind of the terminology for the collection?
I just call them serving trays. It's
serving trays. Okay. So if you haven't already, glad you're here tonight. But one thing we'll definitely be referencing to, and definitely you should check out, is Vintage Vinny has been on YouTube for how many years? Like 7 years?
Was it July of 2013 I uploaded my first video?
Okay.
Right after I got to high school.
So almost 7 years. And so he has an extensive collection of back videos to be able to explore. And he does a lot of videos on his... on the serving trays and on the Coca-Cola collection that he has. So this will kind of bring a lot of those individual videos together. And hopefully we'll all learn a little bit more as we go. Okay, I think we've just got my daughter's new nickname, the Huckster Helper. I might have to just share that with her, Jeffrey. I think that's perfect. I'm not sure she'll think it's perfect, but I'm kind of loving it. Hey, Tim, from Over the Years. We were just chatting about you right before we went live because I saw your most recent video going to, I think you went to I can't remember if it was a flea market or I know you went to a yard sale, and you're in Maryland. Also, Vinny is in Maryland. And so we were just discussing what the rules are for social distancing and all of that in Maryland versus here in Illinois. So I'm sure we've got many different states represented. Alex from Chapter 2 Vintage Co. is on here, so she represents Florida. So we've got Florida covered. Florida seems to, like you were one of the last, Florida was one of the last states that seemed to kind of lock down and then one of the first ones to open up. So you've got kind of the Wild West going on in Florida. So I don't know what you're experiencing there, but I think Alex talked about the fact her thrift stores opened up probably like a week or two ago. I think you've had a little bit more exposure and access to thrifting resources. Ours just opened up basically yesterday, somewhere on Friday here in Illinois. And then Maryland, pretty much when did you guys start opening up? Was it just within the last week or so?
About a couple weeks. I've got a couple of weeks from thrifts, yeah. Okay.
So yeah, so if you want to share in the chat where you guys are based and what you're experiencing with if you're a reseller or if you're also hunting for your own collections. Curious, I sell in a 9-state territory for my day job, and every state is treating it slightly differently. And nobody knows the right answer, but it's interesting sometimes to hear how each state handles it. Okay, and then there's the other thing going on with some curfews that are I think unrelated to the pandemic, which right now I'm in a suburban area, so we're not affected by anything like that. But we don't need to turn this into a whole other discussion. So we're coming up on we're at 3 minutes past the hour. We've got quite a few people on here. So hi, Sandra. Okay, so Texas. Okay, so you've been open for about 2 weeks. All right, so that's good to know. And just kind of seeing who else is in the chat that I might have missed. Oh, Nathaniel's here. You know, we don't actually hear much about Nathaniel's what's going on in New Zealand. So I don't know how much access and how many, what kind of quarantining New Zealand has been going under. But 1969 Nathaniel is here from New Zealand. And if you haven't checked out his channel, discovered Nathaniel through the Antique Nomads Challenge, Show Off Your Bunker. He had his great video that he posted for that. And he's now posted a few. He's got some amazing collections. And if we can figure out some time zoning, maybe Nathaniel will be a part of this session at some point later on. But for now, we're going to go ahead and get things started. Is with Vinny from Vintage Vinny. He is joining us to talk about his Coca Cola collection. My name is Patrick. I am from Trusty Huckster Mercantile. And if you're new to my channel, first, welcome. I started this style of video, actually the first one was posted just last week. I did a live interview with Katie from Vintage and Vinyl, talking about her typewriter ribbon tin collection. And when I first decided to do this, I reached out to a handful of people, primarily people I saw through that challenge, through the George Show Off Your Bunker challenge, because I got to see their collections. And because you know what, that's kind of what I wanted to do in these deep dives. Is it's not a sale. Some people know me, and some people might know Vinny from our live sales. These are not sales. This is really going to be a discussion, hopefully to educate everybody. And Vinny was one of the first people that I reached out to, along with Katie, to say, "Hey, would you be willing to do this?" And didn't even realize that I was going to have back-to-back metal shows. So not that there's a problem with that, but suddenly I was doing the ads going, oh, I kind of did tins twice, but that wasn't intentional. I don't even really sell tins. So for my resale side, this is totally entertaining and totally educational. So I hope you guys are here to enjoy the same thing. If you like what you're seeing, please give the video a thumbs up. And if you like the concept of these, again, you can go back and see the typewriter tin. I'll be doing some videos. A couple people have agreed to do them. We're just working out dates. We'll have some, we'll do one on fountain pens. We'll be doing one on cocktail stirrers. We'll be doing one possibly on antique dice and cards and domino, like maybe some antique games. Each one we want to keep fairly niche-y. Like I don't want to have too broad of a subject. And so it's going to be, hopefully we get some good details and have some fun. So that's it. Enough about me. We will let Vinny introduce himself. If you do that.
So hello everyone, Vintage Vinny here. If you don't know who I am already, I am a collector, reseller, hoarder of pretty much anything vintage that I can find that's cool. Sell some of it to you all, hoard it for myself. I apologize for my appearance. I was out in the sun for probably, what was it? We left that place at what, 11? So I was out in the sun from like 5:30 to 11. So I've got sunburn on my face. I'm stuffed up from allergies because some crazy plant is growing and messing with me. So if I sound a little congested, I'm sorry.
You'll be fine. Yeah, it's one of the downsides. Everyone's been locked up for 2 months, that suddenly you go outside and allergies just attack because our systems aren't used to being exposed to it all like that. So as we get things started, we're going to kick things off, and there's going to be definitely some time for questions during the live chat. Hi, Michelle from Comfy Cozy Living.
Hey, Michelle.
Definitely some question. If you want to have if there's any questions on anything that Vinny talks about or anything that just in general you'd like to hear, we'll keep it limited to the idea of the Coca Cola collection. But definitely just throw that into the live chat. And this was something that popped up in one of the sales previously, just to clarify for people that may not have participated in these before. There is a difference between the live chat and the comments. So just make sure that you're putting your notes into the live chat. What actually I've discovered was I had people bidding in my last live sale. They were bidding in the comment section, but I didn't know that until the sale was over. So that didn't do them any good. So if you got comments, go ahead and put them into the chat, and you should see them along with everyone else's, so you'll know you're in the right place. And we'll get things started. So I'll throw it off with basically the first question is kind of why Coca Cola serving trays? How did you get started with Coca Cola, Vinny?
Honestly, I really don't know how I got into it. It was just one of those weird things that I was like, oh, I just want to start collecting them. And the first thing, not to make this too long, that I started collecting with the old tin lunchboxes with the different TV shows from the like 60s and stuff. And then for whatever reason, I saw the Menu Girl serving tray at an antique shop one time, like maybe this is years and years ago. And I liked it, but I didn't want to pay the price that the antique mall was offering it for. So years later, when I decided I wanted to collect them, I popped up on eBay and found one in decent shape for like $13.50, and then the rest is history.
What was your first tray? Do you remember? Do you still have it?
I might have it up here. Maybe I don't. It was the Menu Girl tray from 1953.
I remember that
was
one of the ones you reviewed in, I think it was in the Bunker Challenge. I remember the one she was holding a menu. I do remember that one. What era was that one again?
That one was produced from 1953 all the way up to 1960. I think it was given out at a grocery store because I remember seeing them like in a display with a bunch of bottles of Coke, like in an old photo from years and years ago. So that's probably why there's so many of them out there, is because I guess that was just one of those big promotional things.
So that one was from the 50s. And so that was more, were those maybe less used necessarily in restaurants and bars, that like you said, that was more of a promotional giveaway item?
Yes.
And
I believe so.
At what point did your collection, I think when we were talking previously, some of the older ones in your collection really were more utilitarian, that they were the ones just like, the Beck's beer trays now, that the bartenders would carry in a contemporary setting, that once upon a time, these were like actual serving trays. When did you start getting into the older ones?
Honestly, it just kind of snowballed. Like I started with the Menu Girl tray, and then let me advertise this real quick. If you all want to learn about Coca-Cola collecting, this is the Bible for Coca-Cola collecting. This is the most up-to-date version of this for Alan Petretti. He did guides for years for many different collections, but this is the most up-to-date from 2008. Hey, that rhymed. I'm Dr. Seuss now. But yeah, this has virtually everything you need to know from about 12 years ago. He has not updated since, as far as I know. And it's still a pretty pricey price guide, but you can get them cheap if you know what you're doing.
Now, you said that was in 2008. So how does that, I'm trying to reference how old you are. So how does that compare to when you started your collection?
I started, I think when I was, oh God, we were living at my grandmother's at the time. So it was after I was 15. So I was probably 16, 17, like right around the same time I started reselling.
So the book is probably older than when you started getting into the collection then? Because that would have been around 2000 or so that you started collecting?
2014, maybe 2015.
Oh, okay.
The book was about 7 years old at the time.
Wow. Okay. And what is the oldest item that you have in your collection now? So like you said, you started with snowballing as you got the older ones. I know the oldest I saw in your video was something from 1907. Yeah,
the tip tray.
Is that the oldest one in your collection now?
Yes, it is. I wish I brought it up here. I didn't, because I was scurrying around trying to figure out what the heck to put in this. I wasn't expecting like certain things. So I was like, okay, let me just grab what I can and brush it up here.
We are here to have fun. We'll just make it work. So if we talk about, we won't have the visual, but you can go into his videos. The only reason I know it exists is because he talked about it in one of his videos. But that first one, so if that's one of your earliest ones, the 1907, I do remember from your video that was also your first tip tray. So now that collection's grown over time, correct?
It has. I've got quite a few of them now. Yep.
Do you so can you explain what the difference between the different sizes and the shapes, what the different trays were used for?
So the tip trays were used for, paying for your beverage. And then the serving trays were used to obviously bring you your drink from the soda fountain or from the kitchen, I guess.
And do you have a preference now of which type you collect, or what part of your collection is building fastest?
The regular serving trays are the ones that have grown for me substantially. I don't have very many tip trays. At first, I was more, let me buy the serving trays because those ones are, like, you can find those pretty easily. And then I found the 1907 tray for like 50 cents, and then I got hooked. So now I have that. But like if you've seen it, it's not in the best shape. But for being 103, 100, however old it is now, I can't do math. I'm tired. But for as old as that one is, for it to have survived and be in the shape that it's in, that's pretty remarkable. And for the price I paid for it. So
if we all look that good after 100 years. Well, Katie from Vintage and Vinyl threw out a good question that, this is as good a time as any to tell, because the tip trays they're smaller. So I think they're easier. I would think they'd be easier to display. Are they the ones that tend to get reproduced more often? And how do you tell if a tip tray is authentic or any tray is authentic?
Well, you really want to look at the image of the tray. And let me start off with this one. So this is a repro. I don't know if it's going to show up on here or not, but you can tell by the fuzzy image. Like this, well, maybe this is not the best example of that because it is rather clear and very well.
You said this one's the reproduction?
This is the reproduction, yes.
And when you say reproduction, when were these reproduced?
So the teens trays, goodness, were reproduced from, well, these ones that I'm going to share with you all were reproduced in the 70s, like the early 70s, like 1973. The 20s trays were in, I think, 73, and then I think they came to market in like 1974. The trays from the teens were reproduced in 1972. But a company in South Africa in the late 50s, I think it was like 1959, called Metalix, Metalix, reproduced some of the teens trays even before the 70s came. So yeah, so definitely be careful with that. Like with this one, like I said, I don't know if it's going to show or not because I got a glare in here. Yep, I guess that's okay. So see where the trademark is, like we mentioned before, that it's not in the tail of the C. So this is a reproduction.
And do you have an original of that same image?
Believe it or not, I do.
Fantastic.
And funny story, when the quarantine hit, I was shopping on eBay, like kind of arbitraging to see if I could find certain trays and just whatever I liked to see if I could find something special. And, okay, that was loud. And I found a bunch of these. So here's an original. Like, do you guys notice how clean and clear that image is? Like, it's just so, it's nice. It's not fuzzy. It's just great. And you'll notice, or hopefully you'll notice, if my webcam decides to focus, trademark is in the tail of the C. There's no Reg US pad off underneath that. And this is from 1925 for those of you who want to know.
Can you clarify that part again? Because I think this is something that I'm familiar with because I watched your video, basically all of your videos on repeat. So in the original one, the trademark, what does it say in the C? So in the original one, there's something in the C of Coca Cola. There
is. In the original, it says trademark Reg US pad off. Let me see if it'll show. I don't think it will because it's so small.
So in the original, what does it say in there again? Say it one more time, because I'm actually making notes.
Trademark registered or Reg US pad off or registered US pad off.
Okay. So all of that fits in that tiny little tail. So I didn't realize it said that.
Right. And on the repro, it will just say Reg US pad off underneath the tail of the C.
Okay, so it's outside the tail of the C, and it doesn't have the word. Is the original? Does it say trade or trademark?
Trademark on the original, Reg US pad off, just with the reproduction.
So that's one place to be able to tell the difference between the two. And you said a lot of the ones, at least in the 70s, they were actually saying something along the side. There was something printed saying they were reproductions. Was that the case?
Yes, the ones from the 70s did say this is a reproduction of an image from World War I. When they reproduced it in the 50s, also, it did say like this is taken from an image from World War I.
Okay. And then you're talking about, and I didn't connect it when I watched your videos, but when you just said it here, is the reason the image is fuzzy, were they literally lifting the artwork from an original tray, or did they still have the original artwork to make the tray? Is that why it's not as clear? Because they were kind of making a copy of a copy.
Possibly what you said, the second thing that you said, is because I don't think they had intentions of making it look exactly like the original. So that's, I guess, because it was maybe just a cheaper way to manufacture as many as they possibly could to get them out to the public again. I don't know for sure, so don't quote me on that.
Sure. Now, with the repros, you said some of them were as late as the late 50s and then a bunch in the 70s. I'm a child of the 70s, so I think I'm probably more used to all the reproductions. But something in the 70s, that's still being considered vintage. Is there a market for the reproductions? I mean, they're still 50 years old. Is there a market for those, or is the market really just for the originals?
Depending on what you're looking for. I mean, for me personally, I don't like the reproduction trays, and I sound like a hypocrite now because I've got some of them with me. But they're only really worth what you're willing to pay. Like the ones that I just shared with you all, or at least the 1925 reproduction, I paid about $1.75 for. So, and that's going to Chapter 2 Vintage Co.'s daughter once this is over. I got to ship those out to her because her daughter likes these. So if you like them, that's all that matters. And spend what you are willing to spend on them. There are plenty of them out there. So if you don't go to eBay and buy them for like $20 and have shipping, because it's not even worth that. At least in my opinion, it's not.
I want to clarify, there's a couple notes in the chat, and Jeffrey and Katie are mentioning it. So what Jeffrey's saying from Real Nifty Vintage, so the trademark reg, so it was registered for a patent, but not yet granted. And then Katie has a follow-up question. So what I want to clarify is, so the trademark word was dropped from the repros, but didn't the word reg still exist? So it was still saying it was registered. I want to make sure that we're saying reg and not requested.
Well, I have my Umbrella Girl tray here. I'm looking at it now, and it says trademark reg. So here's the Umbrella Girl, possibly one of my all-time favorites next to some of the earlier trays. By the way, for those of you who don't know, this is the last tray that was produced that featured a pretty girl on it from this era, from the 50s. She kind of looks like Liz Taylor almost.
So now that one has it under without it being in the tail. So is this one considered a repro, or is this the original?
Nope, this is an original. This one was never reproduced as far as I know. And this is actually a Canadian tray. Like, these were made here in the United States, and then they were imported to Canada. So they had them in English, which is the version I have, and they also made it in French for parts of Canada that spoke French.
So that's going to have to be a mental note for me, because I was convincing myself that if it's not in the tail of the C, then it's not original. But this one is original, and it's not in the tail of the C. So the later ones changed that ruling a little bit.
Yeah, as time went on, they changed the way that they did things. So it's not all the same. Like, over the years, they did change some of their ways of patenting their products.
Okay. And then with the ones that were the ones that you said were reproduced, I think you said was South Africa in the 50s. Did they also carry the same rulings, or because that was international, is that like the Wild West that you have no way of knowing if it was marked as reproduction?
I've only seen just like a picture of the front of the tray. I've never seen like, oh wow, I can't remember. It's been a while since I've seen an image of that tray specifically. So
okay, a couple of things that you showed in your videos when you got into the older trays, that there were also some markings down at the bottom that talked about the that the copyright was like the painting itself was copyrighted. And is that only on the originals?
On the girl running on the beach tray, was that one marked with an art? I don't think it was, but some of them will have the artist's name on them. Okay. And then the ones that, I think only 2 of them that I know of had the artist's name on them from 1938. And then the other one was, what was the other one?
I think the Hamilton King one might.
Yeah, the Hamilton King tray. Yeah, that one had the artist's name on it. I think they also did it for the 1913 tray also. Let me check because I have it up here with me. All right, so this is the 1913 girl here. Let me see. There is oh yeah, it's right here. see if it'll get a close-up for you. Yeah, it's right there, right where my finger is. It says Hamilton King right there.
Okay. And then is this the one that showed in the very bottom left-hand corner, like a little circular seal that said that the painting was the copyrighted? I think that was in one of the Hamilton King ones, but I think the one from 1909 maybe.
Yep, and I got that one with me too. Yes, so this one, this is from 1909, 1910, and right here in the corner. I wish it would focus for you all.
So you can kind of see there's a curvature of a stamp like toward the curve of the corner underneath the Coca Cola. You can barely see it. Unfortunately, it's not super clean, but so what that had said was painting only, copyrighted 1909. Yeah, there you go. So if any of the ones that have that type of a stamp, was that also included when it was reproduced, or would those dates of like 1909, would those have all been stripped off of it?
No, they would never have put this on the reproductions.
Okay.
The reproduction for this one, as far as I know, was made in 1971. It's just a solid red color with a fuzzy image of this Edwardian-looking lady.
Okay.
There's no decorative border or anything like that.
And I know that you mentioned that in some of your previous videos, that it's the shape of the trays that sometimes are the giveaways of whether something is original. So can you talk a little bit, maybe we're kind of going as, I think I took us out of order. If you show some of the trays that you've got that are original, can you talk about the differences between how they were originally created and then which ones were reproduced in which shapes? Because I know you mentioned like the Elaine tray and certain ones were just never redone in certain shapes. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I think I can. I think I've got one little prime example. Again, going to Chapter 2, Vintage Goes to Water after this. So this is a reproduction of the 1923 Duster Flapper Girl serving tray. As you can tell, this is ovular. The only ovular tray that I know of that has been produced was the Betty Girl tray. Let me pull that one out real quick. Sorry about all the metal clacking.
Well, and it's fun. If you watch some of Vinny's videos in the past, you'll know as he talks about his collection that he does not like things to be mint condition because it's harder to keep in mint condition. So you only got stacks of trays and you don't have ways to display them. It's got to be sensitive to what's going to happen to that paint when you stack them on top of each other. So
here's Betty. This is the Betty tray from 1914. This would be, well, they made a reproduction of Betty in the ovular shape as well, but they never made this tray as original in 1923. It was all square. And I'll show you the original of the 1923 in just a sec. I'll give you a little bit of a close-up detail.
So remind us again. So this one is the 1923. This is the Betty tray?
From 1914.
Oh, that's 1914.
And then, oh, did I just move it? No, I had it. Oh, it's right here. All right, let me move Betty over for just a second here. So here is an example, again, not a very great example, but an example of an original 20s, 1923. See, they never made this one an original.
Now, something I didn't notice until you showed them like side by side, I guess I saw that in some of the videos, for all of the original ones, so the original Betty, the original Flapper Girl, are all of the rectangular trays, are they all a standard size? Like if you were to stack them all together, are they all a uniform size?
Yep, most of them are.
Okay. And then is that also cover for like the tip trays that you have? Are those also all the same? Because those are the oval shapes as well. Are they all the same size oval, or did that vary over time?
With the tip trays, at least the ones from the early 1900s to the point when they stopped making them, they all stack together.
Okay. And then were there any other examples that changed? I think there was something about the Elaine tray. I think that was a unique shape when it was made, wasn't it? That was the longer one.
It was called the long tray. That's what they called it. It was an elongated tray.
Do you have that one?
I don't have it with me, but it's in the other room. If you want me to go grab it.
Yeah, go grab it because it's a fun shape. I'll banter a little bit and I'll look at the comments that we came through. So Harry mentions that.
So,
And hi, Harry. Welcome to the channel. So Harry mentioned he's got 2 of the 50s ones, but not the one from the 50s you showed that was from Canada. Yes, I really do encourage you to do a deep dive of your own into Vinny's old videos. And they're pretty well labeled. Sometimes you have to scan past the images of the thumbnail because he'll do haul videos and things like that that are talking about what he's found. He's found Coca Cola trays, so sometimes you want to skip over those. But when he does the reviews, there's some great collection that he's built up. So yeah, so that was the Elaine tray I think you were talking about, and I think you sold. Maybe you sold one of those? I think Katie was talking about that in her collection. If you watch Katie from Vintage and Vinyl, she's got a wall of Coca-Cola trays that she does her videos in front of, and some of them are from Vinny. So what's this one?
This one is the 1916 Elaine girl serving tray, also known as the World War I girl. And it's very, very nice. I love the bright colors on it, and I just like the image of the Edwardian era girl that's sitting here.
Now, is that taller? I know it's narrower, but is it taller than the other trays, or is it the same height, just narrower?
Very tall.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think I realized the scale of it from the video. That's a lot taller than I realized it was.
It is. It's very tall.
Now, how would that tray have been used compared to like the rectangular serving tray I could see being fairly simple to serve off of? This seems like an odd shape to serve, but was it still considered a serving tray?
That I don't know 100%, but I think what they did is they held it like this, and then they put a glass here, glass here, glass here, and glass here, and maybe they just carried it like this. That's just a rough guess, though. I don't know for sure.
And then was this the one, was the elongated shape ever reproduced in the 70s?
Yes, it was. And it's the same thing. Just look for, oh God, this is going to be a complicated one to share. I might have to do it backwards or upside down. But yeah, see where the trademark is?
Mm-hmm.
It's right there. You can just look for that. If it's a reproduction, it will say Reg US Pat Off underneath Coca Cola.
Excellent. So that still seems like a fairly good rule of thumb, although it seems like from the 50s it might have changed. But so if it's in the tail of the C, that's a stronger indication that it's one of the originals. Because admittedly, through the webcam, or at least through the quality of what I'm receiving, I'm having a harder time seeing the fuzzy picture compared to the crisp picture. So I think it's one of those cases you need to see them side by side live and to know what how to compare the two. Now, one of them, and I'm not sure if it was this one. There was one that you also talked about when they redid the reproduction. They changed what it said in the glass. And I can't, like the glass that she's holding, I can't tell which one that one says.
That was the 1913 tray. I'm so sorry if you guys don't like the sound of metal clacking, but that's what we got.
No ASMR here.
So here's the reproduction of the Hamilton girl. So as you can see right here, the glass that she's holding, it just says, get it up closer for you all. It just says drink Coca Cola in there. And of course, this is a really horrible example of the reproduction. And then let me grab the original, if I can find it in this madness. Ah, here we go. And here is the original again. Now, as you can see in the glass here, there's a 5, and I think that's how much it cost back then, so 5 cents. So if you ever see this tray and you see, let me see if I can get it to focus for you all, kind of, there will be a 5-cent stamp on the glass along with the Coca-Cola, and it kind of covers it. So if you see that, that's authentic.
Now, one of the things that I noticed, because I definitely caught that in one of the videos, that the switch was to that drink Coca-Cola. But so I was thinking, oh, okay, so if it says drink Coca-Cola, that means it's reproduction. But then I saw you did some 1922, 23 trays. Those all say drink Coca-Cola. So at what point did Coca-Cola switch the advertising to go from focusing on the price to just simplifying it to the drink Coca-Cola? Do you know?
I don't really know that answer specifically, but I do know that I think that when they reissued them, they had to find some creative way to distinguish the originals from the fakes. So I think what they did is they took a good examination of the actual tray itself, and they picked out one certain detail, and then when they remade them, they just removed one of the, I guess, stamps on there and just said, okay, this is what we're going to do when we reproduce them. Like I said, don't quote me on that. I don't know if that's 100% accurate, but
no, we're group thinking here. It's good to see. I've never seen this many different trays in one place. So even just having these as a reference, I think just like Tim from over the years just said, it's just good to know that those are the types of tips that we can watch for. Now this one is the original, and now so this is another kind of piecing together some of the videos. So again, I encourage everyone to go to Vinny's channel and look if this is an area of interest. You'll learn a lot more. I'm just trying to collapse all of this into one video. Now this one has a relatively simple solid color border, and
it is.
And a lot of the reproductions also had the solid color. So is at what point did they stop doing the super elaborate print on the borders? Was that a design change at some point, or this one just didn't happen to have a elaborate design?
That may have just been a preference of when the company made them. Like I know you saw on the Elaine tray, it had a really nice intricate border along with the 1909 tray. Maybe that was just something that they decided not to do. Again, don't quote me on that.
And one of the things as we were talking about the different art, you would refer to, like, we've got the Elaine tray, the Betty tray, the flapper girl. Like most of them were describing the girl or she was wearing. There was one that you referenced. We talked about it here, and then you also talked about it in your video. Is the Hamilton King girl, and I think you've had her. You've had her before. She was from 1909. Was one of them. Yep. How often? I think Katie even had mentioned from Vintage and Vinyl that there were two different Hamilton King girls. How often were there artists popular enough that they were signing the work compared to just having an image of a girl that would just be known as Elaine or the Running Girl? At what point did they have artists doing these that were signing them versus not?
Fairly slim to none, I would say, from what I've seen on the trays. Only a few of them, like they had to make certain stamps on them, I guess, just for the company name. But for certain artists, only a few of them I know have signed their name for whatever they've done. I guess because they had to make a deal or something with Coke, or they had to sign the patent rights to the art. I mean, there are a number of things that could have taken place back in the day. I just don't know for sure.
And we're talking a lot about what we're seeing on the front of the tray. How do the backs of the trays change when you go from original to the reproductions?
Well, I think the perfect tray I think we can use to discuss that would be this one. This is from 1934. This features Tarzan and Jane, aka Maureen O'Sullivan and Johnny Weissmuller. So if you look at the back here, it's kind of like a black color. Of course, this one's not as nice and clean as some of them that I have, but always look for that black color. The reproductions for this one, it'll be like a mustard yellow or it'll be gray on the back. So they reproduced this one in the 50s, and then I think they did it again in the 70s. So just be on the lookout for that.
This has been reproduced twice?
Yeah, it was. Like Betty was. And the running girl tray was reproduced once. But yeah, notice, again, I don't know how well it's going to show up on here, but just notice the clear image of these two Hollywood stars. Like, it's not fuzzy. It's a very nice, clear. It's almost like it was just printed on there. Hopefully that's showing well.
Yeah, that one's showing pretty crisp.
Okay, good. I'm behind it, so I can't really see.
Right. And I think that one in one of the videos where you talked about that, it did compare the reproduction was very obvious that the image looked like somebody put it on a Xerox machine or something, and it didn't have any crispness to it at all. Not at all. So when so the background colors, again, you said the 70s one was the mustard yellow. What were the colors of the original? Were they painted on the back or were they raw metal for the originals? They had that black color. The originals were black. So that's painted black. It wasn't clear it was coming
painted
across.
black before,
Okay, so that's not raw metal. That is actually painted black.
It's painted, yeah.
Okay. One of the comments that's come into the chat, and it's just more of a commentary, is the idea that it was used once upon a time is the idea of Coke syrup. One, that it was used for medicinal purposes. And I know that I think we determined you didn't have your first tip tray, the one from 1907, but it said, what I found interesting is that one said it relieves fatigue. And I was curious, did a lot of the earlier ones, were they focusing on that aspect? And at what point did they move away from the medicinal portion of it? Do you have any other traits that showed that?
So I know that, well, we all know Coke was patented and I guess first released to the public in 1886. So right through the turn of the century, I think because it was used for medicinal purposes. And then I guess they decided to move it into the, soda fountains were considered pharmacies back then. So really got to connect that together. And then I think once the 20s came around, like maybe into the 1920s, into the 1930s, they really started to change the way that they advertised their product.
We were talking before we went live on that idea because I drink Dr. Pepper. I don't necessarily collect it, but I drink Dr. Pepper. And one of the things that they did initially was the same idea of the medicinal. They used to use a logo that looked like a clock, and it had the hands marked at 10, 2, and 6. And those were the times of day you were supposed to take your Dr. Pepper almost as a medicinal addition. But extending the comment that was made about the Coca-Cola syrup, that reminds me, that was Sandy from For Sandy's Lilacs. I remember watching in your video, I think it was I think you referenced it, the 1929 tray. You mentioned that they had two versions of it, one for fountain and one for bottles. And is that one that you still have in your collection, or was that one that you were using from an internet photo?
The one that I have in my collection is actually for bottle sales. That one, and it's so funny because they always deem that one to be the hardest one to find, but I got one of those, no problem. It's the fountain sales one that I'm having a hard time getting. For whatever reason, I don't know. But
do you know at what point they stopped pushing the fountain aspect of it and started going sheerly to bottles? Like, I have no idea when the Coca-Cola, I know that there's a whole range of how the bottles were made. Like at what point they would have stopped pushing it as a fountain sale drink and pushing it more as just bottles? Or did they always do fountain sales?
I think during World War II, again, don't quote me, this is just from a documentary that I watched. I know that they sent bottles of Coke over to GIs during the war, kind of to give them a taste of what it was like to be home, even though they're in a far, far land. So I know that they sold bottles of Coke and they shipped them overseas. And then I think as time went on and, the war ended and things were kind of getting back to normal, they marketed it in bottles so that way people could have it at home. Or no, was that the 20s? I think it may have been the 20s that they started marketing it for the home. And then as time went on, they started doing bottles and things like that.
I'm sure there's a whole deep dive available in this, but the idea of the Coca-Cola bottles, I know, evolved over time, and I don't know exactly when, but that the hobble skirt bottle that became kind of the definitive Coca-Cola, that was something like the 5th or 6th generation. And so I'm curious that I never connected it when you were showing the videos that most of the older Coca-Colas were showing them drinking it out of a glass as opposed to drinking it out of a bottle, until you mentioned that one in 1929 had both a bottle version and a fountain version. Do you know, are there any other versions that had that double availability, and which ones? Is it always theoretically that the bottles were harder to find, or was that the only one that you know of that did too?
I'm trying to think. I think it may have only been that year that they decided to market the trays with soda fountain and bottles. Wait, no, I'm wrong. I think they did this in 1930 also. Katie has a representation of this tray. It's a girl, and she's just talking on a phone and saying, "Meet me at the soda fountain." So they did that one, and that's for the soda fountain. And then what was the other one that they did for 1930? Oh yeah, it was kind of like another flapper girl, and she's in a bathing suit, and she's like the wind's blowing in her hair and whatnot. And she's holding a bottle of Coke in her hand. So those two are from 1930. Advertisement.
Something I hadn't pieced together until you just said that. So a lot of what we're talking about is this was the 1909 one, this was the 1922 one. Did they issue a new, like 1 or 2 new designs each year, or was a design ever carried for multiple years? So if you find one, how do you know that it's necessarily the 1909 Hamilton King? Like, did they do the Hamilton King Girl also in 1910, or were they limited?
I think a lot of people tend to mix it up. I think, especially on the market now, I think maybe the tray was manufactured in 1909 and they released it in 1910. And then each year they did put out a different one. I do know that once World War II hit, the Roadster Girls tray, which is from 1942, that was the last tray that they issued up until 1950. Because, with the war effort and, they needed the metal to make all the stuff that they needed to help provide for the warfare, they didn't make trays for the longest time. So it was about an 8-year period until they manufactured the next tray, which is the girl with the wind in her hair.
All right. Excellent. So For Sandy's Lilac is commenting as well that the fountain sales, that the Coke glass, and I'm not sure if that was represented, if you could pull up the one that had the 5-cent logo on it, I'd be curious to see this. So the way the Coca Cola, the way the glasses themselves were made, and I vaguely remember seeing this before, they'd have that shape where it's wider at the top and narrower at the bottom. And at some point, like an inch or so above the bottom of it, there was a line, and you would put the syrup in there up to a certain certain mark. So it's easier for the soda jerk to, fill it. And then you did the carbonation on top of that, and that mixed your drink. And so I'm curious what you could see in the glass that she's holding, if there's a line or anything that represents that.
This one has it. Elaine has it.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's great that they did that level of a detail. So okay, so that would have been the glass size that, or the glass shape. So it's that wider at the top, and then that line. Oh, that's very cool.
Again, I wish it would focus better. My computer is horrible.
We can pretty much see the line, so I think we're good with that. So syrup and seltzer water. I have soda, the soda water, carbonated water.
Yeah.
We were trying to come up with the terms of it in the chat. So I've got another comment from 1930. Oh yeah, so Katie did mention she does have the 1930 tray from Vintage Vinny. So we don't have quite the split screen to get her collection in here as well. I had set my timer to make sure that we had some time to do some wrap ups, and if these are any other questions, I apologize because my Huckster helper was not here. I've been trying to scan the chat as well. If you had a question that I missed, go ahead and retype it, because I apologize if I missed it, but there was a string there for a while where I was trying to look at the tray that I wasn't watching the chat. But while we do that, did you have any trays there in your collection that you haven't shown us yet? That you just want to do a little bit of a show and tell of some of your older trays?
Sure. This one is rather hard to get, and I was kind of shocked when I saw it because it's just not something you see very often, or at least I haven't. This is from 1921. And what's interesting about this tray is in the 70s, they took the calendar print, which featured the entire image of the pretty flapper girl, and put it on the tray. Here, it kind of cuts off like right at her waist, and you just see her face and the glass.
So that
when these represent, they're expensive.
So then that actually triggers another question. So was this art, like we were talking about the Hamilton King work, was this art created specifically for the trays? You're saying in this case, this art was used for a calendar first, and then they used that for the tray. Do you know what was the norm? Was the art developed for the tray, or did the art come first in another, like a print ad or something?
I honestly don't know. I think they just mentioned, or not mentioned, but they put, I think they created the art, and then back then you have to remember there weren't as many ways of, seeing ads like there are now, like with our technology and everything. Like they had to come up with really creative ways to advertise their products, whether it be bookmarks or a coupon for the product, or putting it in the newspaper, something that was like in the public's eye. So they used the same kind of art, but they had to, you know, make it unique.
One of the questions that popped up in the chat is, I can't remember if you've shown us, do you have any of your tip trays there in in your stash?
I don't. I did not
Okay.
grab any of the tip trays.
One of the
but they were
questions,
black too, I think, like in a lightish green color, because Katie and I talked about that the other day, and she had said that it's kind of like a gunmetal green, like kind of like a yellowish green color on some of them that make them original too, not just black. On the tip trays, not on the regular serving trays.
and in all cases, so they were always painted. Was there ever a mark or any sort of embossing or anything that was on the back? Was it always just paint?
I think it was just paint.
Okay. All right. Any others that you hadn't had a chance to show us? Do a little bit of show and tell there.
What other one? Oh, yeah. So this one is relatively new, but it is hard to get. This one's from 1982. This is for the Coca Cola Clan Convention, and it was for the 8th one. And here's the back, and it's got Sprite Boy. And Misty, don't hate me, he does kind of look like a creepy clown. So there were only 2,000 of these made. Yeah, he does look kind of creepy, but I love him regardless.
Now, do you know when the Sprite Boy was made? Like when he was introduced for advertising? Because he's prior to 82, isn't he?
Oh, yeah, he's much older than 82. I think he came out in maybe the 50s.
Okay. And so that tray, so it's the Coca Cola Clan Convention? Is that what you called it?
Yeah, it's the Coca Cola Clan Convention tray from 1982.
And so what was the convention? Was that specifically for advertising trays, or was that for all things Coca-Cola?
I think it was for all things Coca-Cola, as far as I know.
Okay. And do you collect anything else, anything other items from Coca-Cola, or do you only do the trays?
Well, right now it's just the trays because it's what I can afford. I did buy a fishtail clock, though, like, what was it, a month ago for like $150, which I felt was really reasonable. It's on Instagram if any of you guys want to go there and check it out. I took a picture of it and posted it.
Yeah, I definitely saw that. That was a very cool clock. Based on cost, what do these typically cost? If you're talking about, if we stick with just the originals, if somebody wanted to go out and buy one today, if they were to hop on eBay or Etsy, in general, what would they be paying for some of the range of products that are available?
Well, you do have to consider that condition is everything. So if you see a tray that is practically never used, has no scrapes or dings or anything like that on there, expect a higher price. If you are looking for just a tray that does have some wear because you do like it to have that patina of, hey, this was used and now I get to own it, it's all in a matter of what people are asking, what they know about the tray, if they know what they have, if they don't know what they have. So you can get them for relatively nothing, like I did for that one tray. I paid 50 cents for the 1907 tray because they didn't know what it was. Or the most I've spent is $51, and that was for my Elaine tray here. So it's all in a matter of the condition and what you're willing to pay. If you're somebody who likes the mint, good for you. Spend the hundreds of thousands of dollars it takes to get those trays. But if you're like me, who is a cheap then just from what I've told you today, and if you ever become interested, just make sure that you know what you're buying, because I would feel so bad if somebody spent $200 on a 70s tray like this. I would feel terrible.
Now you mentioned your Elaine tray was your most expensive. That was $51. How is that one in the range of wear? Like if that one was pristine, what would it cost? Can you show that one again and kind of talk about how much wear it has to give us an idea? Because how long ago did you buy this one? For $51?
I wish I had my phone with me. I think I bought it about a month ago, maybe a month and a half.
That's a relatively recent price. So, okay.
Yeah, it was. It was definitely a very reasonable price. This one, I mean, expect defects with any of them. Like this one has some cracks in the paint. I don't know if it's going to show up on here or not. And there's a line that goes across a lane space. Again, this is over 100 years old. I don't expect perfection. As long as I can see the image and it is clear and nice, I'm not really going to be too picky about it.
Now, related to that, like you said, she's got a scratch on their face, which I don't even see. So obviously, it's a relatively minor scratch. If you're trying to weigh out the level of damage, what would you say for someone who's trying to build a collection is the best long term? Like obviously, you want to buy what you love, but if people are legitimately trying to build up a collection and want to consider value, which is better to have something with relatively light damage, but the damage is maybe to the face or something, or to the logo, something, or something that's fairly heavily damaged, but maybe all the damage is around the edges and the center image of the girl is actually in perfect condition. Which is the better to put into your collection?
It all depends on what you like and what kind of patina you like. Personally, for me, a tray like this that has very little damage but does have some cosmetic defects is perfectly okay with me because these are old and vintage is imperfect. But what I did at the beginning when I wanted to buy certain trays is I would buy what we call placeholders, where you'd buy a tray just to have it because it was relatively cheap and the damage was pretty bad. But then as you built your collection up and you found ones that were in better shape for a better price, you sell off the one that was not in the greatest of shape and kind of give it a cycle of life here. So somebody else who wants to start a collection can start off with that same tray. And then once they get a better one in better shape, then they can pass that one on. So it's all in a matter of preference, but that's the best way and the cheapest way to go about it.
And that's a great tip for collecting anything. I switched, looking behind me, that's how I've built up this stoneware collection. I've probably been building for 20 to 30 years. And it's the same idea, is that in some cases, and I still have some, you start with those starter, or like what you said, the filler pieces or placeholder pieces. And then in my case, it's literally a placeholder. I want quality over quantity. So this is as much as I can hold. So I put something there. And then when you find something better, you replace it and then make that available for sale. And I love the idea of like what you just said, is then you let that go on to the next collector who's trying to build up their collection and they need a placeholder. So it's all about passing it down the line. So we get to the final moments here. I wanted to just throw out the last question is, do you kind of have the unicorn, the white whale? What are you hoping to add to your Coca Cola serving tray collection? Like what are you on the lookout for?
Really any of them that I don't have. And I know Katie and I have talked a few times about some of the trays that we both want, because she has trays that I would like, and then I have trays that she would like. One of the pieces that I really like are from the late 20s, and it's of the soda jerk. And then there's also a tray called the car hop, or like the bellhop tray, where soda jerk comes out of the car and he's holding the tray, and then the passengers of the car are drinking the Coke. And it's a really cool image, but those always command a high price, and I'm still on the hunt trying to find those.
And based on what you just said, I'm going to throw out one last question because I'm curious now myself. You talked about from 1942 to 1950, they didn't make any trays at all because of the war, because of the materials for the war effort. In general, are the trays prior to the war, are they the more desirable because of their age or their design, or are those ones that were made in the 50s just as desirable?
Well, the Menu Girl tray, let me see if I have one of her up here, and I think I do. For those who have never seen her before, she's always going to be desirable among collectors because it's rather unique. There's images all over the border here.
And what year was this one?
1953 to 1960 is when they produced this one.
Oh, so this one was over a multi-year period. Okay.
Yes, this one was over a multi-year period.
So that'd be explaining why they'd have a lot of them. 7 years.
They did have a lot of them because of this, yes.
Okay.
Kind of like why you see a lot of the reproduction trays from the 70s, because they were marketed to help sell the app product.
Did they change it at all between 53 to 60, or was it the exact same design the entire time?
Funny you should mention that. You guys see where it says "Have a Coke"? The lettering right here.
Yes.
I think this is the later version, because the other one that I have, the lettering is a little different, and I think this one might be earlier. because of that.
Oh, okay. So it's like a whole subset of collecting, typographic collection, what typeface is on each of the Coca Cola trays. That's awesome.
Yep.
All right. Well, we're coming up to our 1 hour mark. So I want to thank Vinny for doing this, for agreeing to be on this show. This is, you know, even though he did show that book, if you want to show that book again, if you're interested in Coca Cola collecting, we are not sponsored by this book. We have no relationship with this gentleman that wrote the book. We do this all on our own, and we're just doing it for fun. So I hope for those of you that joined us, you maybe learned a little bit of something. I highly encourage you to go back and look at Vinny's YouTube channels from previously, because he has some great videos that he's shown in the past of and it's kind of interesting too, because I did go back and watch these in prepping for this show, kind of how his collection has grown over time. And you can see at what point he decided to replace something, or, you know, when the placeholder turned into something else. So it is really interesting. And it's always nice to have those guidebooks, even if you can't use them for price, to know these are what's out there. And what I really want to thank again, Vinny, for giving us those highlights, how to compare for the reproductions compared to the originals, because I will just say, I don't come across them super often, but when I do, I always assume they're reproductions, because I wouldn't have known how to know if it was original. And now I've got some tips, and hopefully you guys all learned something too. So again, thank you very much. We're going to sign off with from Vinny with Vintage Vinny, and I am Patrick with Trusty Huckster Mercantile. I will have all of our links to our channels and our social media will be in the comments once the video posts, and appreciate all of you joining us tonight. I'm not sure what my next one will be. I'll probably start doing these maybe every other week. Doing the live shows and these live interviews is becoming a little taxing on my schedule. So I'm not sure what's next, but there's a couple fun subjects coming up, and I'll definitely be promoting that. So go ahead and subscribe to my channel, subscribe to Vinny's channel, sign up for those notifications so that when things like this do pop up, you'll know all about them. So thanks again for all of your time. You guys all have a good night, and thanks for putting your trust in Trusty Huckster. Goodbye.
See you guys.